According to Shams, the Miami Heat are now open to listening to offers for Jimmy Butler. We also know the reported list of preferred trade destinations that Jimmy Butler has as well. We're going to take a look at that. Plus, Brandon Ingram has put the Pelicans on notice to say either re-sign me or trade me. And a lot of the Blazers veterans are reportedly garnering interest out on the trade market. We're going to take a look at all that plus more on today's NBA Central.
Welcome to the number one place for your daily basketball news and analysis, NBA Central.
What's going on, basketball fans? Welcome to another episode of NBA Central, your number one spot for everything basketball related. I'm the host, Hayes, but more importantly, you guys can follow the channel at NBA Central Pod on every social media platform we happen to be on. With that said, let's go ahead and get into this content for today. So, Shams dropped some news today in regards to Jimmy Butler. And it said this: the Heat are open to listening to offers for Butler and making a deal if the proposal is right. And Butler's agent, Bernie Lee, has indicated in league circles that Butler is open to destinations such as two Texas teams, Houston Rockets and Dallas Mavericks, and the Golden State Warriors. Hey, listen, it's about time. The question when it all comes down to this, though, is what is the value that Pat Riley has on this deal, right? And, of course, are they going to be incentivized to get Jimmy Butler to the team of his destination? We know why the Miami Heat are looking to move on from Jimmy Butler. Pat Riley's already talked about extending Jimmy Butler and the fact that $52 million that's due next year if he opts into that contract. So it comes down to that. When you look at Jimmy Butler's preferred list of destinations, kind of makes sense. He's from Texas. So playing for either the Houston Rockets or the Dallas Mavericks makes some sense. Golden State Warriors are a team with Steph Curry and Draymond there that could make some sense. And coming out of this as well is that Jimmy Butler wants a win-now contender if he is traded when it comes down to that as well. So it said this, again from Shams. Above all, though, it is believed that he is believed to prefer a win-now title contender in any trade. Teams have also been informed that Butler intends to opt out of his deal in the offseason and become a free agent, sources said. The Heat have hovered around the play-in tournament over the last two seasons, and with Butler's contractual status, they have been open-minded to trade inquiries. So, if Butler plans on opting out, it's a risk involved for teams that would get involved for him. And when you look at the three teams that are rumored to be his preferred trade destinations, Golden State Warriors, I could see them that we know that they are open to moving on from some of their young talent to bring in more win-now talent as they're trying to put something together around Steph Curry now and take advantage of this window that's open there. But Jimmy Butler to the Golden State Warriors trade, to me, just doesn't really make sense. I get it that Jimmy is a talent. He's a defensive player. We see the heart that he's played with. But Jimmy's already started to slide. And, the Golden State Warriors, when looking for win-now talent, I get it that what Jimmy Butler has done. Make no mistake about it, how Jimmy Butler has played, I respect so much and love the game that Jimmy Butler plays with. He is just a player that plays with heart. When you watch Jimmy Butler play and he leaves it all out there in the court, it's hard not to root for a player like Jimmy Butler. It's just hard not to. But then you also look at, what does that mean for the Golden State Warriors? Do they have enough young talent around there? Do they have enough depth? Buddy Hield has fallen off a cliff to a certain degree, not being that 20-point-per-game scorer that he was off the bench. And so I can understand why there may be some interest there. It's just when you look at them matching that salary, that may be a thing that's a tall test for the Golden State Warriors. Same thing with the Dallas Mavericks. Unless they're willing to move off of, Klay Thompson, Daniel Gafford, right? These type of players that already make like $15 million and things like that to match Jimmy Butler's salary. But then you still got to look at, okay, it's not a one-for-one trade, so then who else are the Miami Heat including in a trade like that? So it's not necessarily as seamless. And then the Houston Rockets, we've heard that they could be a team where Ime Udoka is interested in win-now talent, but is like Jimmy Butler is, make no mistake about it, he's a win-now player, right? But how much does he up the ceiling of that young team already? And that's the risk they have to run, is that one of those young players that they would have to include in that type of trade could very well be better than Jimmy Butler or a year or two, right? Which the Miami Heat would absolutely love in a case like that. So how this all works and the maneuvers that happen here are going to be really interesting to watch and how they see they materialize. But, Pat Riley is somebody that it's interesting here that they're open to, but not necessarily shopping, right? And Pat Riley is going to be a guy that Pat Riley is the type of GM that you love if he's the GM of your team, right? Because if there's a little bit of hope for him to win a title, he will say, so you're telling me there's hope, right? So you're telling me there's a chance, right? If he sees a little bit of chance to do that, but I think a lot of people look at the Miami Heat roster and say that this is a roster that makes sense to go younger. You got Tyler Hero playing at a great level right now. Don't know how sustainable that is. You got young players like Jaime Jaquez and Khalil Ware and these guys in the weeds as well. And is it time to kind of pivot around Bam? But then Bam hasn't necessarily had the season that you hope for. And the Miami Heat right now are starting to turn things around, right? A lot of the teams in that Eastern Conference that got off the slow starts are starting to correct those ships. And so, is that the risk they want to run? The Miami Heat right now have won 5 out of the last 7 games. 5 out of the last 7 games, and I think 8 out of the last 10 or 7 out of the last 10. So because of that, is this the best time to strike, or is it a time where maybe they look to add rather than to take away, right? There's a lot of things up in air when it comes down to that, but it does make some sense. It does make some sense for them in the long-term thing, and that's what Pat Riley will be looking at, is the big picture here, right? And if that ends up happening, great, right? Well, and we'll see what happens there. But overall, this is something to watch out for. And it's funny that now we're hearing more and more rumblings about players and people that could be available at the trade deadline as we get closer. We're passing that December date where a lot of the contracts come available. Another one in January, and after that January 5th date or whatever it is, you could probably start seeing some big moves made by then, if not before then. So Jimmy's name now being out there as a player that teams could take a look at is going to be interesting. I don't know if Jimmy's going to make it to one of his preferred destinations, but I can absolutely. The Heat are committed to moving Jimmy Butler. They're going to find a trade that makes sense for their team. And, we'll just see what that holds. Let me know down below. Outside of the teams that Jimmy Butler has said that he is preferring, or that are rumored that he prefers, what are some other trade destinations that to you make sense for Jimmy Butler to go to, that he can help in win-now situations? Let me know what you guys think on that down below. But with that said, another player that was mentioned in that Shams report was Brandon Ingram. And basically, Brandon Ingram has a situation in which he's looking at either you extend me or you trade me. And that's what it comes down to Ingram. And listen, a lot of NBA players have the right to feel that way. I say every NBA player has the right to want stability, right? And if you're on a team that isn't going to give you a contract extension, trying to get to a team that you can get traded to that will extend your contract, if you want that stability, it makes some sense there. And Brandon Ingram is still a player with still a lot of basketball left to be played, right? Of course, knock on wood, and that's hopefully in a case like that. And so, Brandon Ingram is right to want what he wants. And I think Brandon Ingram, while he's out right now, and that ankle injury has him out as indefinite, 22 points per game. 22 points per game on 46% shooting. He's also shooting 37% from three-point range, taking 6 of those per game, which is 6.5, which is the highest volume of his career as far as taking three-point shots. And, while everybody else was going down all the time, and, he's been that guy. Now, Brandon Ingram has never played over 65 games except for his rookie year in the NBA. So, of course, there's some thought and some concerns around that. But 5 rebounds, 5 assists per game, 1 steal per game. Like, Brandon Ingram is a productive player. And it just comes down to what is the structure that you have there to that Brandon Ingram can help your team the most. Now, a team that's been already rumored to be a trade destination that could make some sense for Brandon Ingram on paper, we don't know if there's actual interest there, is the San Antonio Spurs, right? They have a ton of salary cap filler that they can do. Harrison Barnes is a great one there. Zach Collins is another one there. These are players that can that can be salary cap filler for a team that wants to move on from Brandon Ingram. And then you look at the number of draft picks that they got in trades as well. So if you're able to get somebody like Brandon Ingram that can move, because he's played everything from the 2, the 3, and the 4 for the Pelicans. Theoretically, you send him over to the San Antonio Spurs. He's there. He's the actual 4 next to Wemby. That makes some sense. And listen, Brandon Ingram still has some upside. And you look at also the Spurs are in a unique situation where you got Devin Vassell, who signed for less than the max. You got Wemby, who's on his rookie scale deal. You got Chris Paul, who's a free agent at the end of the year. You got Castle as well, who's on his rookie scale deal. And to add a 27-year-old player like Brandon Ingram, who doesn't turn 28 until before the start of next season, it could make some sense for them to not only trade for him, but even maybe be able to weather a little bit of that longer-term contract for Brandon Ingram, maybe a 3-year extension, something like that, to make sense to where it coincides with some of their other sometimes where some of their other players are going to want and need extensions. So it could make some sense for Brandon Ingram. But I think this: if the Pelicans want to move Brandon Ingram, they can find themselves a deal, and honestly, a pretty reasonable deal because I think he's just that type of player. Yes, he has flaws. He has injury concerns. He has those things that are there for him, and we're not going to act like those concerns don't exist for him. But I do think that, it can make some sense for Brandon Ingram for you to move him and get something back rather than lose him for nothing. And that's the risk that they want. He's an unrestricted free agent at the end of the year. He has a $36 million contract. And we'll see what the future holds for Brandon Ingram, but he's a player that makes a lot of sense for the Pelicans to go ahead and move off of. A lot of players actually make sense for the Pelicans to move off of, and we'll see what the Pelicans do at this trade deadline. But hey, shout out to Brandon Ingram for taking control over his own thing, basically putting his wants and desires out there, and we'll see where that leads him at. Now, Shams also talked about a team that is ready to be completely ransacked by other NBA teams when you look at the pieces that they have that could help teams in their playoff run. And we've talked about the Portland Trail Blazers before, right? You look at the number of players that the Trailblazers have that could help teams. Anthony Simons is, of course, the biggest one there. You got Jerami Grant. You got DeAndre Ayton. You got Robert Williams, Time Lord himself there as well. And they could be looking to move on from some of these players and take advantage of gaining assets. That's where the Trailblazers should be. Is they should be in a situation where they are just gaining assets and stacking up assets, stacking the deck, so to say. You got a 25-year-old player in Simons, a 26-year-old player in Ayton, a 30-year-old player in Jerami Grant, and Robert Williams, even though he's only 27 years old, those knees are about 42. But, when it comes down to it, you got players. And I think when you look at it, really the only players that the Portland Trailblazers should absolutely be looking to hold on to is Donovan Clingan, Shaedon Sharpe, of course, Scoot Henderson because they just got him, Chris Murray as well, maybe a little bit there. But a lot of those players could be on the move, and it could make some sense for them to move on from those players as well. So to hear that teams are really interested in their veteran pieces, it just makes some sense. You look at where the Portland Trailblazers also are with spending. They have $177 million on the books, and $89 million of that, over half, is committed to DeAndre Ayton, Jerami Grant, and Anthony Simons. So, they have an opportunity to lessen their salary, get back a lot of assets back to stack the deck so they can keep trying to get players here, because we know one thing about the Trailblazers. They are not a free agent destination. They've never really been that. So when you look at the total number of salary that comes from those three players, this is an opportunity for those guys to have to move. Now, Grant and Simons aren't necessarily having the statistical years that they've had before. Jerami Grant is averaging 15.3 points per game on 38% shooting. Simons is averaging 16.5 on 40% shooting and 30% from deep as well. So, you have those guys, but this is an opportunity for them to really move off of some money, right? And it makes sense for what they do. It's not just the salary dump. It is that makes sure a lot, but it's not just a salary dump, but it makes some sense. And so, it's a lot to watch and to see how this is going to ebb and flow for these teams. But I'll say this, that, teams like the Portland Trailblazers, teams like the Pelicans as well, who we just talked about with Brandon Ingram, but reportedly teams are also interested in CJ McCollum if he becomes available, things like that. They all have players that at the trade deadline, teams that are looking to add to solidify their run. It makes sense to try to move on from these players. So, we'll see. You also got the trade buzz for Dennis Schroeder that's growing as well. It's trade madness around the NBA right now. And so a lot of these rumblings are going to start getting louder and louder and louder. And as they do, these teams that are in a position to try to tank for the flag or race for the flag or whatever you want to call it, they're going to be trying to maximize their chances. And, especially the Brooklyn Nets, when you look at where they are and the fact that they are a team that people didn't necessarily expect to even have the success that they've had. You look at Dennis Schroeder off to the best start of his NBA career. We've already heard that the Nets may be willing to move off Cam Thomas when it comes down to that as well. They're going to have another list of players that teams around the league could very well be interested in to add to their run leading into the playoffs. So this could be, I won't say for sure that it's going to be, but this could be a very interesting trade deadline for a lot of different reasons to see what teams are trying to solidify their chance at Cooper, what teams are trying to solidify their chance to make playoff runs, what teams sit in the middle, who makes good trades, who makes bad trades. A lot of things are up in the air, and this is some of the best time as a basketball fan to really watch is kind of the drama of it all behind the scenes on top of some really good basketball being played as well. But let me know what you guys think down below. When you look at the teams that could be looking to move off a number of the roster, didn't even mention teams like the Utah Jazz or Chicago Bulls as well. They could be looking to move off some major pieces of their roster. What teams do you think have the best chances to do that and to get some picks back or to get whatever they're looking for back, whether it's young talent or whatever else it is? Let me know what you think of that down below. Make sure you guys are following the show at Bull Central. I'm sorry, wrong podcast. Make sure you guys are following the show at NBA Central Pod. You can send us any feedback, questions, comments, concerns, NBA Central Show at gmail.com. And then lastly, if you want to leave a text message and our voicemail for the mailbag, the number to do so, 773-270-2799. We are the number one spot for everything NBA and basketball related. And I'll see you guys the next time I feel like making a video, probably tomorrow. Peace, y'all.
This has been a presentation of the Breaks Media.